Fulton, Missouri, a quiet little town in the Midwest. Not much has changed since 1946. Less than a year since the war had ended, the flags were up to welcome Winston Churchill. But he came to Fulton bringing a somber message for the world.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe. Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest, and Sofia. All these famous cities and the populations around them lie in what I must call the Soviet sphere.
The speech was not well received in the United States. It was thought to be too tough a speech. And the president was criticized by some for having Churchill over. Just goes to show how history changes. Now it's one of the great speeches that's ever been made because it helped warn the world about the danger of the Soviet aggrandizement.
Back from overseas came the Americans. For the second time in a century, the United States had been pulled into a world war far from its own shores. "300,000 Americans never came home. But the rest returned to a country wealthier and happier than ever before."
I sort of eased back into contentment. I said, gee, this is wonderful. People seem to have a little cushion of money now, which, back in the Depression years, no one had any money. You just had about enough money to put food on the table and put a roof over your head and keep your insurance policy in effect,
Before the war, we had 15%, maybe sometimes more, unemployed, and a very stagnant, unhappy economy. And the war production of munitions, production of armaments, put enormous sums of money into the economy, put millions of people to work, not only men but women, Rosie the Riveter, and we emerged from the war with virtual full employment.
As soon as the war was over, the factories, they realized, hey, the Americans have been without a car since before the war. Let's get back into automobile production. And of course, the people were anxious for automobile. There was gasoline available, foodstuffs became available. So the economy definitely was on the rise.
War and the post-war rush to spend put American capitalism back on its wheels. In the first summer of peace, the Soviet soldiers rode home. They were awed to find themselves still alive.
До Москвы уже совсем недалеко. Поезд идет из столицы Германии. И вот он, счастливый час. Здравствуй, родная Москва! Здравствуйте, герои-победители!
In the crowds that welcomed them, it was the lucky ones who found their sons or husbands. Some 27 million Soviet civilians and soldiers did not live to see this day.
И целовали людей незнакомых, радовались. Это было большое ликование.
We met the soldiers with flowers, bread, anything we could get hold of.
Душевный подъем. Люди, какая-то надежда появилась, что кто-то еще, кто может быть...
We kissed complete strangers. We were so happy.
Известно, где он, потому что были же...
Our spirits were rising. We even dared hope that those who had gone missing might still be alive.
Очень надеялись, что, может быть, они найдут родных, что, может быть, это ошибка.
The whole of Russia had been destroyed. Everything from the borders to Moscow lay in ruins. There were lots of people with no homes to go to.
Where the Germans had passed, nearly 70,000 villages had been destroyed. Cities lay in rubble. Stalin's pre-war achievements, the factories and apartment blocks of the 5-year plans, had been wrecked by the invaders.
Things which before the war hadn't seemed too bad were completely destroyed. People were living in ruins. It's impossible to describe the suffering. You can only understand it if you've lived through it and seen it with your own eyes.
For Russians, the end of the fighting brought an instant of pure joy.
Ну что вам я могу сказать? В Берлине, в центре. Другой раз так забудешь, не вдумаешься глубоко, посмотришь. Напротив Рейхстаг, а здесь Бранденбургские ворота, которые Геббельс-то камнем, который заложил. Все равно прошли.
Berlin, the final battlefield. The capital of Hitler's Reich had fallen to the Red Army. Dazed Berliners waited to see what the conquerors would do to them. But there was no organized massacre. The survivors were allowed to live as best they could. Stalin even ordered his troops to feed the Berliners, but the soldiers looted homes, and all over the city they hunted down women.
More and more Russians came by. They looked through the window. Then one of them suddenly came in. I was babysitting. He took the child from my lap and gave it a toy and some cigarettes to play with. That was the first time I was raped. It was terrifying. Afterwards, I couldn't speak.
Stalin's police chief Beria and Foreign Minister Molotov tour Berlin. Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones, and each of the Allies took a sector of the German capital. The Allies had decided that Germany should compensate them for war damage.
Marshal Zhukov said, "We have fought long and hard. We've captured Berlin. We have the moral and legal right to take out as much as possible in reparations. We don't know what the future holds."
The German population was forced to help the Russians seize industrial resources. Not just machines, thousands of craftsmen